Greg Laird is a practicing attorney in Tulsa, Oklahoma. He has represented numerous defendants at every stage of death penalty jurisprudence, including 2 victories at the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals, thereby saving his client's life from the Oklahoma death chamber. He wrote the book One Life for Another so readers could experience the twists, turns, and inner turmoil that comes from representing people on death row. He is the founding partner of the Laird Group, where he represents clients in a multitude of legal areas, including criminal defense. In his spare time, he likes to read, attend sporting events, and spend time with his children. This is a very different subject than we've ever covered on Cowboy Up, and we hope you enjoy it. Hello, Russell. How are you doing today?
I'm good.
Are you?
Good. It's kind of windy and it's already March. I don't know how that happened, but
it is. It's astonishing how rapidly it occurs. I never could have imagined that as I got older, time would go by as quickly as it did.
They warn you. Warn you.
I was in my 30s about 3 weeks ago, so I don't know what the heck happened.
We've all been warned, and then it happens.
And you just can't believe it when it does. So. You know, we have we've got a great time ahead of us, I think. You know, nobody likes an attorney until they have to have an attorney, and then
Exactly.
That attorney becomes their best friend. And I've been really fortunate to be able to grab this gentleman. He is on a national book tour right now. I talked to his publicist yesterday. He is busy, and he has written a book that I want to get into it, but it's so darn interesting because I'm not sure if it's fact or if it's fiction or if it's a combination of two. Of the two, and I just really, really enjoyed reading it. Greg, I'm going to bring you on. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you today?
I'm doing fantastic. I think you're stuck in an airport. Is that accurate?
I am between flights, so we got good timing here as far as that goes. And I just want to say I really appreciate you guys having me on your show to talk about my book, One Life for Another.
I'm thrilled because you know what and I'm going to tell you why I didn't like your book. It took too much of my time because I couldn't put it down and I had to try to do other things that had made me stay up late. And I don't like that, again, at my old age. I mean, I'm trying not to eat dinner at 4:30, but this book is really, really good. So before we get into the book, though, I want you to talk a little bit about who you are and what you do, because that's kind of a compelling story in and of itself.
So I'm an attorney. I went to law school at Georgetown 20 some odd years ago, as you talk about time flying. Over the course of that time, I have represented several people on death row in Oklahoma. At various stages, I've had people at the jury trial stage through the state appellate work and also at the federal appellate level. I've been fortunate enough to get 2 people off of death row in Oklahoma with victories at the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals. And unfortunately, I had to also watch one of my clients be executed 3 years ago. So kind of the gamut there. But then I've also just tried about 40 jury trials in my life, both criminal defense of various types, and then as well as plaintiff's personal injury work.
Wow. You know, I remember one of my favorite scenes from the movie Top Gun was when Tom Cruise starts to walk out of the courtroom the first time he's in there, and he stops, and he looks around and he goes, so this is what the inside of a courtroom looks like.
Yeah. I know the first time I went in, I was super nervous, but I'll never forget when it came time to stand up and talk for my client. I got the courage, and everything went well. It's amazing when you're there for someone else, the amount of courage it gives you and the strength it gives you, as opposed to, you know, if you're just speaking for yourself.
So, yeah, and in your case, and not a lot of criminal attorneys, in your case, you're battling for life and death in some cases. And how many states? Oklahoma's a tough state. How many states, if you know, retain the death penalty?
I think it's in the 20s. I don't know the exact number. And then there's a lot of them that still have the death penalty, but don't actually execute anyone or haven't in years. I'm fairly certain California fits that mold. They still have the death penalty, but last I checked, they hadn't executed anyone in 20 or 30 years. But Oklahoma, Texas, those are kind of the top two that are regularly executing several people per year.
And I know some people in Texas say that they want to put in a bench system because sometimes they want to execute 2 and 3 at a time, which seems unbelievable to me.
Yeah. And the thing that a lot of people don't realize is it's hard on the prison staff as well. I mean, the whole process is hard on everyone. So when people say things like that, I think maybe you want that for the defendants. But you've got to think about everybody else involved in these situations. It's not an easy thing to go through for anyone.
Absolutely not. So I have to ask, because this is something I've wanted to know from when I started reading the book. What was it like the first time you sat down with someone who was accused of a capital crime, and you sat down with them in prison to talk to them about what was going on? How enormous a moment was that for you?
It was huge for sure. And, you talked about the book and how real it is, in One Life for Another, the room that I described meeting, the young attorney meets with his client in, it is the exact room that I met, my first client in. I try to do my best to give people an understanding of what it's like to go visit a client on death row. So most of the book is made up, but that is kind of one of the little realities kind of tucked away. The visit in the room with the prisoner there is the way it is. And yeah, that very first time I was definitely nervous and interested. And of course, at the time I was young. I was, late 20s, early 30s. So I had this client who was a few years older than me and had been on death row for 15 years. And he's looking at me like, why'd they give me this young kid? But I got off of death row, and now they have tablets in prison. So I talk to him almost every day through text messaging. So, it's been 26 years later since I first met him.
Is that when you got off the death row but is in for life, or what's the status?
Yes, both of the ones that I got off death row, they definitely committed the murders they were convicted of. One of them, there were like 15 eyewitnesses, and the other one, there was a second victim that survived, and eyewitnesses and DNA. He was arrested with blood all over him, the victim's blood. So both of the people that I got relief for ended up getting life without parole. They just got off of death row. So their capital convictions were overturned, but they will spend the rest of their lives in prison. One of them was unfortunately murdered in prison this past summer, and then the other one is still alive, and he's the one that I met first and that I talk to regularly.
So that makes me think of two questions. So number one, how do you get clearly, I guess you said, clearly guilty clients who are set to be executed? How do you get that sentence changed? What was it, a error, or was it just misapplied? Or?
It was constitutional error at their trials. So at their original jury trial, the judge made constitutional errors in decisions, and basically both of them, it was in regards to the jury instructions that were sent back, and the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals agreed with my position that the jury instructions weren't properly submitted to the jury. They didn't provide what we call a lesser included offense. They didn't give the jury the option to find that the murder may not have been intentional. So the murder definitely happened, someone died and at the hands of my clients, but there was a question regarding intent, and the judge did not give the jury the option to determine the intent. The judge just said, "Oh, I think it's clear that they intended to do this. We don't need this lesser included," at the trial level. And then the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals said, "No, if you look at it, because the judge is supposed to only give the law and the jury is supposed to make the decisions on the facts. So the jury's the one that's supposed to decide, was there intent or not. But the judge kind of took that decision out of their hands and left them with a situation where they would have either had to find my clients guilty of first-degree intentional murder or acquit them and release them when it was clear that they had, killed someone." So, the Supreme Court has said, and the 10th Circuit has said, that's not appropriate. You got to give the jury, the first degree instruction and the second degree instruction, and give them the option to, decide what they think. That's why we have juries, is to decide if they think that it was intentional or not. So when the 10th Circuit said no, the judge should have done this, then both of the clients were afforded new trials, but they both decided to go ahead and plead guilty to life without parole rather than risk another death sentence in front of a jury again.
Okay, that was my next. I was going to ask. I was going to say, so why didn't they get a new trial? Was it just because it was a sentencing error? But they were offered one, but they, I'm sure with your guidance, chose to accept the safer path.
Yes, and that's very common. When individuals do get a second trial based on some type of constitutional error, a lot of times they go ahead and take the life without parole. My client who was executed actually, before I represented him, got a second trial and maintained his innocence up until he was killed. And so he went to trial twice and lost again, got a death sentence again, and was eventually executed on that, second trial.
Did he take that claim of innocence to his death?
Yes, he did.
I mean, it's not your job. I know just enough to know. Do you believe him?
I mean, I believed him. Yes. I mean, he was my client. He had every opportunity to tell me something different. The physical evidence was questionable both ways. The long and short of it was that his problem is there was a dead woman in the room, and then another individual that survived that he shot 2 or 3 times, and he admitted to shooting him. But his story was basically he showed up, the woman's already dead, the guy pulls the gun on him, he wrestles the gun from him and shoots the other guy and leaves. The other guy survives, gets on the phone, calls 911 and says, so-and-so just shot me. He's the murderer, but if I die, he's the one that did all this. And but he ended up living. So he testified at trial both times. And that's kind of why he was convicted, is because everyone kind of thought, well, he's the one that got shot, he must be the victim. And my client was like, no, the only reason I shot him was because he was going to shoot me until I got the gun and shot him first in self-defense. But everybody believed the guy that got shot rather than the guy that did the shooting of, between the two of them. So it was a pretty interesting story.
Isn't that an interesting, though, just from a layperson's perspective, listening to those, you've talked about 3 people. One has blood all over him and is there's a witness, pretty clear. The other one, 15 eyewitnesses. The third situation is clearly a he said versus he said.
Yes.
I mean, am I missing it? Or it was basically just his word versus the others, and both have motivation to lie, and he gets executed, and the other 2 get their second trial. I guess he got a second trial too, but wow. Justice system is interesting.
Very true, very true. That's one reason I wrote the book One Life for Another, was to kind of shed light on the death penalty and some of the things that happen, because I have Steve Hansen, the main character, the young lawyer. I try not to be too preachy, but he gets on his soapbox a little bit to talk about some of the inconsistencies in the in capital punishment that we have in America, and I tried to do it in a fun, interesting way, which I guess you agree it was. So I like
absolutely agree that it was. I absolutely agree. And you know, the thing that you've said the word jury probably 10 times since we've been talking, and I've got a couple of friends that are fairly high-end litigation attorneys. They do personal injury litigation, and they actually try cases. And the thing that they tell me over and over is juries are absolutely unpredictable. You don't know what they're going to be doing, no matter what is presented to them. Would you agree with that?
100%, 100%. If I had $1 for every time I told a client or anyone that you just don't know what a jury's going to do, why they're going to do it. You go into a trial and you think you've got some fact or some issue that's really going to be your winner, and then you talk to them afterwards, whether you won or lost, and they're like, "Oh, we didn't even care about that fact, but this other thing over here, was what got us." And you're like, "I didn't even think that one mattered."
Well, and one of them forwarded on a quote to me last night, and he actually wants a copy of this podcast as soon as we get it recorded. And the quote he sent to me was from John Adams in 1774, where he said, "Representative government and trial by jury are the heart and lungs of liberty. Without them, we have no other fortification against being ridden like horses, fleeced like sheep, worked like cattle, and fed and clothed like swine and hounds."
I like it. Yeah,
I do too. I think it's a great quote.
Yes, very good. But yeah, if anyone tells you they know what a jury's going to do, if you ever talk to a lawyer and you're trying to decide who to hire, and one of them tells you he or she knows what the jury's going to do, run from that lawyer. That means they've never tried a jury trial before.
All right. Well, we're gonna take a quick break.
And thank you, Greg, Stephen, and Russell. And things really are snapping here in Tucson, Arizona. The famous Tucson Festival of Books is underway, and we have people from all over the world come and join us here in the great Southwest. And many of them are world-class creators and authors, and it is a wonderful time of celebration. And so all of us are celebrating that great event. And you ought to make a plan. That's right. Right now, say, maybe that's something I should do next year. Well, that would be a good idea. Well, there's still lots of things you can do. The weather is now turning very, very nice, and you should join us. Spring training is well underway, and that's always a great baseball experience. I still remember my longtime ambition as a young boy to someday watch the Chicago Cubs play Arizona League baseball. And I accomplished that goal a number of years ago. It's still one of my best memories. And so things are happening. The great Western traditions of cowboy experiences, they're all here and ready for you. So right now, think about whitestallion.com, whitestallion.com. There's still perhaps some places for you, and we would be grateful for the opportunity to be the hospitality, the adventure, the cowboy experience people for all of you. So remember, whitestallion.com, where this wonderful radio program takes place. So make sure you are doing everything you can to get away from some of the cold and begin to enjoy the great Western Southwest. And bring a book to read, find a way to relax and enjoy. Now, back to the program.
Okay, now you are, and I can't imagine where you get the time. I know you're one of the founding partners of the Laird Group, and you represent clients in multiple areas of legal issues, including criminal defense and I think personal injury. I want you to talk about the book, though. I mean, those things are interesting, and I want to know more about them, but I really want you to talk about the book, your motivation, that sort of thing.
Well, like I said, the biggest motivation is probably just for whatever reason, I've always kind of in the back of my head thought it would be really cool to write a book someday. And so, as you said, time is an issue. And this actually took me 10 years from start to finish. From the first time I sat down and started writing until publication last summer. So, and there were chunks of time where I might, I have a 7-year-old daughter. When she was born, I don't think I picked it up for 2 years in there. But throughout the time, I've just always found time here and there, and I'd sit down and write a little bit and work on it for a while, and then maybe put it away for a while. But the two things was, I just always wanted to write a book. I enjoy writing. Writing is part of the appellate process for, the individuals that I have represented on death row at the 10th Circuit and in the federal courts. You got to write briefs, and although legal writing is different than fictional writing, it's still writing, so the enjoyment of putting words together that sound good and make sense is the same in either realm. So, and then B, I just kind of wanted to shed more light on the death penalty and the fact that some things may not always appear as they seem right at first blush. In the book, similar to, and the weird thing is in the book there's a 911 call that makes our client look like he's guilty, which is kind of similar to the one case I had, but I actually started writing that book before I was assigned that gentleman's case. When I got his case, I was like, oh no, people are going to read my book and think I made this up from this experience. But I actually had already had that whole idea before I got assigned that case. So yeah, it's just kind of just because you have a ton of evidence doesn't always mean it's pointing in the right direction.
And your job is to paint that evidence and display it in such a manner to where it is either advantageous to your case or your client. The access I had allowed me to have lunch one day with one of the defense attorneys on the O.J. Simpson trial. And the thing that he got across to me, he says, well, the system that we have, you've got a defense attorney that wants to do everything he can to prove that his client's innocent, and a prosecuting attorney that wants to do everything they can to prove that individual is guilty. I'm sorry, defense attorney obviously is there to make them be innocent. And the two processes are diametrically opposed to one another, and it creates issues.
Yes, for sure. And someone was asking me how I do what I do, because there's some people that are like, how do you sleep at night representing someone that killed someone else? And it goes back to just, in America we have this adversarial process, and the quote you read, without juries and without an attorney on both sides, then I don't know where we would be as a country. It's just so important for us.
Well, I'm kind of a hardcore law and order guy, and I'm old enough now where a lot of my really strongly held views have been impacted by real life. And my theory on, which you won't like, but my theory on capital punishment has always been that capital punishment provides closure for communities and has a place in a civil society, but it should only be your guy who it was his word versus another guy. In my worldview, which is pretty much just mine, that should never have been a capital case, because it just had too much possibility of being decided wrong by a jury, this unpredictable group of people that you've described. So, but if somebody goes and drives his car through a group of people deliberately and obviously, or shoots a bunch of people from the top of a building in Las Vegas, and they haven't killed themselves, then I'd really like our system to kill them, but only in those unambiguous, absolute cases.
Well, and if people ask me what my opinion on death penalty, and obviously as a defense attorney I'm opposed to it, but I can also appreciate the other side. And I've told people if someone decides to put me in charge of the world someday, I would require, rather than beyond a reasonable doubt for death penalty, absolute certainty, like a different standard of proof required for the state to get death penalty.
Absolutely.
That would be my sort of quote unquote dream scenario. If I could change one thing in the world, it would be in the criminal justice world anyway. It would be to make death penalty an absolute certainty requirement rather than the beyond a reasonable doubt.
Because you can't appeal the execution. And
nope.
and I think that's where both sides can come together. But the other thing that's really had an impact on my view of a lot of things, and I will say, I'll defend myself in this regard. I've never ever thought that a criminal defense attorney was doing wrong. I respected them for filling that critical role in our system that I'm sure for some people in some cases is hard. I mean, not just hard to win, but hard to sort of balance the greater good with the maybe not such a good client. But it's such a critical role. So I've never doubted that. But I tell you what, I'm much less of a fan of the judicial system on the prosecutor side when you look at some of these situations that are either politically or racially or just motivated by money, and these folks have huge power.
Yes.
The relative power that a prosecutor's office has versus a criminal attorney, I don't care how good they are, or how well funded they might be, the power imbalance is significant and it's abused.
Oh, every day, yes, most definitely. Without getting into all of it and bringing up any specifics, I've seen a lot of bad things where people with money and the right color and so on and so forth, their cases get dismissed, and the one with no money and the wrong color sits in jail for 2 years awaiting jury trial. I had a client that this happened to, and we finally got an acquittal. We tried it and got an acquittal. The jury was out 30 minutes. I mean, the charges were ridiculous without getting into the meat of it. But he sat in jail for 2 years because he couldn't afford bond. And there was another individual around the same time that on a case that a friend of mine had that had a lot of money and was white, and they went to the DA, and the DA just agreed to drop the case outright. And both cases occurred within 3 or 4 months of each other. So, and the same DA decided on one to dismiss and on the other one to take it all the way to jury over 2 years. And it was, and there's no doubt in my mind it was because the one individual didn't have the money. He didn't have the money to fight it.
Interesting.
So.
Okay, now, Greg, would you say that your book is? And you've already alluded to the fact that your book is some fact and some fiction. What is the balance of fact over fiction in the book that you've written?
So I would say it's 80%, 80 to 90% fiction. The facts are the law that he talks about, and like I said, when he goes to death row, that's mostly factual. The experience that he has. I did include a scene with like a little putting green in an office that part was made up. But the rest of his experience when he goes to visit his clients on death row, that part's all real. Going to court and sort of the courthouse and descriptions of those issues are real. But the rest of it, the murder and all of those things are all made up. So I tried to make it a fictional story in a realistic setting, if that makes sense.
Sure. It does.
Yeah.
So when you're involved in one of these cases, what are you talking about? A 35, 40-hour work week?
Well, yeah. I mean, it depends on which week we're talking, because the briefs are usually about 100 pages. So usually you're appointed, and you're going to have to, and like in the book, he goes and he gets the original trial court record, which consists of, like 14 boxes of stuff that you have to go through. And it's usually anywhere from 12 to 20 boxes of stuff. You've got all the evidence that was submitted, all the transcripts of the jury trial itself, and any other preliminary hearings that you've got to read through. I mean, you basically pick it up from the beginning and go through the entire case. And, a lot of these cases at the jury level last 2, 3, 4, 5 years themselves. So you've got to kind of relive that whole experience as you go through to look for constitutional error. So when Steve Hansen in the book One Life for Another, sits down and at his desk and starts going through the record, that's true, right? Like, that's the way that I would go through a case to work on my appeal. So that's kind of one of the little factual issues there, right? That's based on truth. But the majority of it is fictional. So I try to make it fun.
Yeah, we don't want to read the 4 boxes. So
yeah.
I don't think you want to read. So do you, in those cases, I mean, that's so daunting. I mean, do you have associates that do some of that, or is that just piled onto you?
It's piled onto me. The good news is I have several months to do it. So, and also like I tried to put in the book too, you're doing this, and then you've also got all these other cases too. You still got to try to maintain a law practice. They don't pay you enough to just do 1 death penalty case or 2 death penalty cases a year. So you've got 6 months to work on this 100-page brief, including reading all of the materials. But you've also got to, you're getting phone calls on your divorce case, and you're getting phone calls on your DUI case and your marijuana possession case, and your, all the little cases that you have that you've got to just continue to work on so that you can pay the bills, right? So it becomes difficult, and usually those last few weeks it's nothing but the brief. But you just got to manage your time as best you can, and just kind of work as you go.
Kind of like having a 7-year-old and trying to write a book.
Exactly.
But you really do have to go through that, right? Because the devil's going to be in the detail somewhere, right? The thing you uncover in box 3.
Exactly. Yeah. No, you have to. I mean, you're not doing your job if you're not reading every single page in every box of, like I said, it's usually a minimum of 15 banker boxes of stuff. And sometimes, I think one case I had 27 boxes. So, you've got to sit down and do it. If you're going to take the job, then you got to do it right. Right. I mean, there's no way to do it right without going through everything, looking at every picture, which, excuse me, that part can be not fun as well.
You end up getting to see society in some pretty ugly ways. Yeah, for sure. And that's another in the book. That's another. There's a scene where Steve Hansen, the lawyer, the protagonist, is looking at pictures of the murder scene, and I put a line in there that is true, was personal, in that you look at these pictures and they look almost fake. You look at enough of them of dead bodies. I mean, I've dealt with 50 to 100 murder cases in my life, so I've seen a lot of different pictures, and they look almost fake, but yet eerily real at the same time. It's a very odd experience, and I try to describe that in the book as well.
50 to 100 of murder cases. I can't even imagine.
You gonna write another book?
That's the plan. I'm gonna try.
All right. Get to be John Gresham. So we've run out of time. It's One Life for Another. Greg Laird. Get it everywhere, I assume?
It may not be in your local bookstore, but you can get it online. I don't know if I can say the name.
Absolutely.
Amazon. You can get it on Amazon. And it's just real easy to find. One Life for Another by Greg Laird. And I hope everyone orders it and enjoys it, and gives me a good review on Amazon afterwards so other people can find it.
Well, I've already done that. So, like I said, it was just it was. I don't want to say it was enjoyable. Like I said, it was something I couldn't put down, and it made me want more. So I guess that's the sign of a good book. I know Russell's written two, and I've written a couple myself, but not to this caliber. This was really, really wonderful.
Thanks for
thank
your
you
time.
again, and
Greg,
thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Greg. I appreciate you taking the time, especially considering that you're sitting in an airport.
No worries.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And thank you to all of you who not only participate in the program. Thank you, Greg, Stephen, and Russell. And we enjoy what you do for us, and we're grateful for it. And for those of you who listen and participate and recommend us to others, we are very grateful and thankful. And please continue to do just that. My name is Stan the Radio Man. I'm the one who helps put this program together. I was the one who got Russell to begin to even think about doing something he had never thought of before, and that was to not only be a dude rancher and a writer, but a radio broadcaster. My company is called What It Takes Radio, and we are here to help you do just exactly the same thing in this world web of new radio opportunities. We will get you on the radio with your own program. So let's see if we can do that. So reach out to me at stan@witradio.net, stan@witradio.net, and let's see if we can make this the year that your business and your cause and your good ideas, they thrive in 25. You are ready for radio. stan@witradio.net, stan@witradio.net.
You know, Russell, this was a little bit different podcast than we would normally have, and I appreciated Greg's time and your willingness to do this. Attorneys don't end up being too many people's friends, again, until they have to have one. And listening to what he said regarding what it takes to do the job and how serious he takes it, gave me a good feeling. I don't know about you, but it gave me a very good feeling that there's professionals out there that do that.
Well, I mean, you know, I think that I'm inferring that if you get and you're in that level of trouble and Oklahoma assigns Greg Laird to your case, you've gotten lucky, because you've got everything maybe at stake, and he seems like the guy who's going to give you a fair chance to get out of that level of trouble. You know, it's just interesting. As I said on the podcast, it's been a journey for me in terms of watching the news and reading about this and that, and the justice system is clearly not always doing its job well.
Well, that's a wrap, folks, and we thank you very much. Please join us again for another episode of the Cowboy Up podcast, and please recommend us to others. And by the way, we'd love to hear from you. Just reach out to us at the Cowboy Up Podcast at gmail.com, the Cowboy Up Podcast at gmail.com. And perhaps you have a suggestion. Maybe you have an idea. Perhaps you'd like to raise your hand and say, Stephen, I'd like to audition to be on the program. I've got a little bit of wisdom, insight, and truth, and I certainly have some stories to tell. Well, we'd love to hear from you. And perhaps you have an idea that you think we ought to pursue, or a book we should read, or something that you are very interested in, and you know that a lot of other people might want to know a little bit more about that. We want you not only to be a listener, we want you to be a player and a participant and be a part of the Cowboy Up podcast. That's what this new modern radio is all about. It's for everybody, not just for those big shots who think they are. We want this radio program to be for you. And it's a way of adventuring yourself, and we encourage you, as we say, to join us here in the Great Southwest for all of the cowboy and western adventures. we would be grateful for giving the sponsors and the people who make their living and the wiles and ways of the West come and visit us and be a part of what we're all about. Thank you so very much. All the best and blessings to you. Ride safely, ride tall, be brave, be bold, and do good work. And be a little bit of a blessing to others from time to time, because that's the cowboy way.